Well, let's talk about all of this with our panel of MPs. Paul Duerr is New Democrat from Ottawa Centre, and he's recently minted as the Foreign Affairs critic for the New Democratic Party. He's here with me in the foyer. In Vancouver, you see him there, James Moore, Conservative MP from Vancouver, and in Toronto, Ruby Dalla of the Liberals. So, Mr. Moore, we've just heard Mr. Coderre basically make the pitch that if ministers are going, it's only polite to bring along the opposition critics. And I must say that when I came here a long time ago, that was always the tradition, that when ministers traveled, the critics went with them.
Yeah, often it's not possible. Obviously, sometimes there are logistics issues. And in fact, when the Liberals were in power, when the mission of Afghanistan started, Cheryl Gallant, who was one of our defense critics at the time, she was not invited along by the Liberals. But, you know, Denis Coderre can go wherever he likes if that's what he chooses. We obviously would like that he would cooperate with the government for a bunch of reasons, not least of which is his own safety. But people know that in Ottawa that one of the more dangerous places to get is between Denis Coderre and a camera lens, so he's going to do what he's going to do.
Paul Duerr.
Well, I guess, Mike, the problem here is that this is becoming about us as politicians and not about our troops for their safety, and we're really concerned about the mission. And right now, our defense critic is in Iceland meeting with NATO partners. And I think that's where responsible people should be, is talking within NATO, because there is quite a debate raging in NATO right now about the mission in Afghanistan. So, I'll leave it to Mr. Coderre to do what he wishes, but I think it's sad when we get into this kind of pointing of fingers and it's all about us as politicians and not about the mission and not about, is this the right mission? And if it's not, then what should we be doing? And that debate's happening in NATO right now. I think that's where defense critics should be talking with people in NATO.
Ruby Dalla, what's your take on this?
I think it's really unfortunate that the Conservative government and Stephen Harper continue to play these petty politics. Denis Coderre is going to Afghanistan because he is going on a fact-finding mission. Kandahar in Afghanistan, I think, cannot be used, for photo ops for this Conservative government. He did go through a process. He did put an application in with the government. They sat on the application. We've learned that the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Bernier, is going to be in Afghanistan, and I find it shocking that they could not find a seat on a government plane, which is funded by Canadian taxpayers, for Denis Coderre, who's a opposition defense critic, who's a former member of the Privy Council. I mean, he's not going to have any military briefings. He's not going to be allowed, from what we've been told, to go on to the base. And it's absolutely ridiculous. We have the minister staying in VIP headquarters, in Kandahar, and we have Denis Coderre probably having to sleep in tents or have these porta potties. It's really unfortunate, Mike.
But Ruby, one of the things, in all seriousness, I'm not sure why he didn't choose to go to Iceland. And I know when Don Black went, Mr. Coderre had been the defense critic when they had the first overseas travel there to do the fact finder. So I understand he might have frustrations. I'm not taking away your point, but I don't understand why he wouldn't be going to NATO right now and debating this mission. I mean, that's the focus right now when we come back to Parliament, is the mission itself. And I think that, quite frankly, that's what I think defense critics should be doing. Would you not agree?
We have always, promoted a multifaceted approach. We've asked this Conservative government repeatedly, as to what the exact mandate of this mission is. When the Liberals sent in the mission, it was on a 3D approach, on defense, on diplomacy and development. And we have seen clearly over the last 18 months, the whole shift has been towards a defense component of it. And I think it was in Don Martin's column today, when he said that the enemy is not us with each other as Canadians. It's not Liberals who want to go on an informative fact-finding mission. It is actually the people in Afghanistan, the Taliban, and it is unfortunate that the Conservatives are using Afghanistan and Kandahar as a photo op and not allowing individuals, to go out there and get the appropriate information, because Canadians deserve the right answers.
Mr. Moore, I hear from Defence Headquarters that in fact there is an elaborate trip being set up for Stéphane Dion later on this fall. I know that's not your particular file, but that's what DND people tell us.
That may well be true, but look, let's not dance around this. Denis Coderre is a pretty sophisticated political operative, and I think that he knows if he went along with the processes and procedures for national security and his own safety that were established by the government, and he went along on a trip with the foreign affairs minister or the defense minister, that he wouldn't be getting any television. And here we are for 5 minutes on national television talking about Denis Coderre. I don't think.
But James, he was never invited.
I don't think he'd have it any other way if he chose to have it any other way.
In all fairness, James, with all due respect, he just wasn't invited. And if he was invited, I'm sure that he would have accompanied the minister. But the bottom line is, the minister's going to be in Kandahar, in Afghanistan at the exact same time. How could they not find a seat on a government plane for a member who is a defense critic for the opposition and a former member of the Privy Council? Canadians really deserve the right answers.
Well, Ruby, your government did that time and time again.
We did not. We had ministers.
Well, it's actually not true. You should have a chat with Cheryl Gallant, who was left off a Liberal trip. But look, as Mike said, there may well be a trip being organized for Stéphane Dion. That's fine. But Denis Coderre is about getting media for himself, and that's what he's doing. And here we are talking about him, and that's precisely Denis Coderre's goal. Let's be honest.
Can I raise one other subject? Today's front page of the Globe and Mail, big story that Doug Findlay, who's the Prime Minister's chief election organizer, had a conference call. And I'd like Mr. Moore to bring us in as one of the candidates who was undoubtedly on that call yesterday. Have you got your running shoes on, Mr. Moore? Are we going to an election this fall?
Well, a lot of lessons were learned in the Outremont by-election, and we don't want to have us happen nationally what happened to the Liberals in the riding of Outremont, which is to say, be totally unprepared. Doug Findlay's job is part of his commitment to the Prime Minister and to the party is to have the Conservative Party ready for an election whenever one is called. The NDP and the Bloc have said they're going to oppose the throne speech. Stéphane Dion seems to be hinting that way as well. So we have to be ready, and we want to continue to govern this country. And Doug Findlay's doing a great job on behalf of the Conservative Party.
Well, the difference in Outremont, with respect, James, is that you called the election and you knew when the date was, and so I think in this instance we're talking about what is the intent of the government. We've said we'll read the throne speech and we'll decide, but people know where we're at. The question is, what are the other parties going to do? And I talked about the mission in Afghanistan, but there's also two other issues that are really important, and that's the prosperity gap and also looking at the environment. And it was easy to criticize the Liberals for not doing anything, but you guys are dragging your feet as well. So Canadians want to know where you are on the issues and not about whether or not you're ready for an election, quite frankly. I think that's
Mike,
the issue.
I've spoken to many Canadians on the ground.
Go ahead, Ruby.
Yeah, I've spoken to many Canadians on the ground, and I don't think anyone at this point wants an election except for Stephen Harper and the Conservatives. On one hand, they continue to say that we don't want to go into an election campaign. On the other hand, they are doing everything, to ensure that they are ready, and I think that they should really start looking towards the needs of Canadians, talking about the economy, talking about the environment, starting to deliver childcare spaces in this country, starting to talk about health care. I mean, the list just goes on and on. This is absolute sheer hypocrisy. Canadians elected a government to function and to deliver the needs and priorities for Canadians, and the Conservatives certainly have not done that.
So you're not going to support the throne speech if it's not in there?
We've been clear about when we won an election. We passed legislation saying October 2009, but when the opposition parties are all saying they're going to vote against something they haven't even read yet, we need to be prepared. And we're pleased, Ruby, to talk about the economy, the strongest Canadian dollar in my lifetime, 33-year low unemployment rate. We're proud to talk about those issues as well, certainly in contrast to your failures on those subjects. But
James,
Ruby,
I said it would read it first.
We're not going to be dictated to by the party of Outremont about how to get ready for the next election, Ruby, with respect.
We're not actually dictating to anybody. I mean, I think it's important that we actually govern. We have a government, who functions and who addresses the needs and priorities of Canadians. James, I'm sure you've talked to many people out in the West Coast. I was just in Winnipeg and hearing time and time again, Canadians do not want to go to the polls. And I would hope the speech, from the throne is going to reflect the priorities and needs so that all political parties can actually support it.
Yeah, and those of us out here in the real West Coast, not Winnipeg, are more than happy with the job that Stephen Harper is doing, and we'll be prepared to defend it if the election is this year or in October 2009 as legislation dictates.
Just for a point to be made, James, I said clearly we'd read the throne speech, but we're not going to hold our breath about you changing direction or your Prime Minister. But the point is, who is going to vote against the speech from the throne if they don't agree with it? And I think that's what's hanging out there. We've said we will not support a speech from the throne that doesn't deal with the three issues I just mentioned. We've been very clear on that, but we will read it first, just to be clear.
And I assume the Liberals will vote against it if they don't get their list as well.
I'm assuming
Stefan Dion has spoken about the economy. He's spoken about getting results on the environment and getting Bill C-30 on global warming back onto the table, about addressing the issue of poverty and ensuring that we also deliver in terms of Afghanistan and finding out what our exact end date is going to be. And I think it's really important that this government start to deliver on social justice issues that really, really impact so many Canadian families, like healthcare and childcare. We need national leadership.